In the game of Go, what is a masterpiece? Well, for years I thought I knew the answer to that question, and I was super confident. But something happened at the most recent Congress that, was giving me second thoughts. And sadly, it wasn't one of my games, but it was a throwaway comment from a pro. So, what did I think a masterpiece was? Well, I bet you it's the same as you and many other people, and that is a game played between two extremely strong players in which they both play really well, probably multiple Tsuji, and one player wins by half a point. And then that game will be known as, well, that player's masterpiece. And I guess that makes sense, and that's what I always thought it was. So what's made me reconsider this a bit? Well, I went to a lecture by Jennie Shen, Tudan, professional, and I don't remember exactly what the lecture was called, but it might as well have been called, Holy Crap, These Bots Are Strong. And to prepare for this lecture, Jennie went through a whole lot of self-play games of the bot Golaxy. And she said, she saw something really interesting. It's that a lot of the games weren't being decided by a point or two, but instead they were being decided by 75 or 150 points. And she said that what happened is the fights would just get so big and unbelievably complicated that neither side even could back off. And in the end, one side killed the other. And maybe it was just by a single liberty, this big fight. But that was the nature of the games. And understand, these are really high-level games. These are being played by the second strongest bot in the world currently. And yet its games weren't masterpieces from the half-point perspective. So anyway, that got me thinking a little bit. And I mean, imagine the games went something like this, that both players were equally matched. After all, it's a self-play game. And each one was in a struggle to get ahead. And as the game progressed, I imagine each time they had a choice. They could play the safe-looking move that guaranteed them some territory and safety for one of their groups. But if their winning percentage fell behind, they were loath to do so. And instead, maybe they would play that extra cut or whatever that left the future uncertain, but gave them a better chance at winning the game. And the opponent would then do the same, have the opportunity to play a safe move, but that lowers their winning percentage. So let's go ahead and get aggressive, and back and forth and to the point where there is no backing out. Eventually, one of these players is going to win and one of these is going to die. Anyway, so that's what got me thinking. Do we have a place for a second type of masterpiece? We've got the traditional one, the half-point game, but is there a place for a fighting game which may be decided by 50 points or 100 points or 150 points, but in reality, it's decided by just one liberty, maybe by a forcing move made 100 moves before it turned out to be key. And I'd kind of like to think so. And if that's the case, if we're allowed a second type of masterpiece, which one's the more impressive? Is it the masterpiece where, two poets sit down opposite the board and tell a wonderful story with many brilliant plays, and in the end, one side concedes to the other, okay, fine, you win by half a point. That's a masterpiece. Or is the masterpiece two fighters, crossing blades and refusing to back down, and in the end, one of them quite simply has to slay the other, but does so by a single liberty? Which of those masterpieces is greater? Okay, if I go through a video without putting stones on the board, then that will be more Brady's bullshit, and I guess we don't need that, so let's look at something. And actually, this is the game that Jennie showed us in that lecture, where, again, it was just about the strength of bots. And let me tell you beforehand that though this game is really cool and really interesting, it doesn't fit the criteria of masterpiece that I just set up, so don't get your hopes up. But it is really cool. And now it was really neat. Now, when Jennie showed us this game, she showed us a whole ton of variations, but she did it on a demonstration board. One of the big boards that's up against, that's vertical, and you have plastic magnetic stones. And she was able to go through a ton of variations in just an hour. And I'm going to do, even though it's easy for me, it's on a computer, I'm going to do far fewer variations, but I'll try to keep to just a few interesting ones. In Golaxy's self-play games, there are just 1,600 playouts per move. For those who aren't familiar with bots, that means basically 1,600 simulated games for each move that it wants to make. And that sounds like a whole lot, but it's really not. And actually computers can make mistakes when there's only 1,600 playouts. So this game itself was played with 1,600 playouts, but the analysis, Jennie actually did up to 2 million moves per playouts, again, using Golaxy as her tool. So what I'm going to do is start with the actual game and what actually happened, and then I'll show some variations. Okay, so this is the position in the game, and you can see that Black has just sealed off the top right and is building a monster center. And it's already big and looking to get bigger, but it's White's turn. At this point, I'd like to ask the viewer a question. No, let's make that 3. Here's 3 questions. Number 1, who's winning this game? Number 2, it's White's turn to move. Is it enough to reduce the top, or does White need to invade? And then number 3, at which point would you choose to either reduce or invade? And as usual with my videos, I'm going to suggest you go ahead and pause and give it some thought if you'd like to. This is really the key question of this video. Okay, time for the answers. And the first question was who's winning? And in Golaxy land, or Golaxy's mind, actually thinks White is winning. 58% winning percentage at this point. And we'll get to caveats on that in a few minutes. And the second question is reduction enough? Well, I think Jennie may have looked at a few different reductions, but she asked Golaxy what it thought of this move here. And it didn't like it at all for White. It feels that White loses 11%, and all Black has to do is just seal off and take enough territory, and the game is good for Black. So even though White is winning, it is not enough for White to reduce in the mind of Golaxy. And it chose this invasion point here. So this is the move that gives White a 58% winning percentage. And I just want to stop for a second, and I want you to admire. I really want you to admire that shape, because, if A wasn't there and White played where White played, I could just imagine me playing there and my teacher saying, play an A, and think, where are you going to play now? You're covered. You can't live here. But Black already had a stone, a capping stone at A, and White chose to play right underneath it and say, yeah, this is the best spot. And I just think that's so cool and so unbelievable. Look, I know the variations are somewhat that are coming, and I still can't believe White lives here. All right, as I said, I'm going to first show the actual game with a little bit of commentary. So when White played here, Black just said, okay, fine, I'll seal you in, no problem. And then White played here, maybe saying, I'll make shape, but vaguely threatening the group at A too. And Black says, all right, I'll see you in this side, and then also helps that former A group. And then White plays here. I'm not exactly sure. Again, maybe it's vaguely threatening A, maybe it's vaguely threatening B, maybe it's vaguely threatening to make shape. I'm not certain, but it probably has multiple purposes. And Black comes here and says, I'm not going to let you have shape. And then White says, well, will you let me have a base? And Black says, I'll break your shape first. And then I'll say, well, maybe you'll get a base, but not big enough for 2 eyes. And then White says, all right, I'll threaten A. And Black says, okay, I'll protect. And White moves out, and again, threatening eventually to connect at A and capturing that whole big upper left group for Black. And Black comes up with this cool double peep where it can either move out or capture the cutting stone. So Black looks pretty safe now, and White is steadily getting enclosed. White connected, and Black said, all right, I'll take away your base. White starts to come out. Black forces a connection and then plays here. And this is a really interesting point. This is Golaxy with 1,600 playouts says, all right, It's enough to just cover. If I can cover and keep white from getting out, I'm probably going to win this game, or at least this is my best chance. And Golaxy with 2 million playouts says, ooh, I don't think so. This doesn't look like the right move to me. And actually, with more playouts, Golaxy much prefers the play at A instead of the cap. And you can see that it kind of serves the same purpose. It seals white in, but actually is a slightly stronger shape, I suppose. Now, what's interesting about this move is as you continue multiple playouts, multiple variations, Black's winning percentage keeps declining as the game goes on with every single one of those variations. So right now it doesn't look too bad, but it's just downhill from here. So I guess you could argue that this is the losing move for this game. But let's see how and why. White starts to move on this side, and then snake out. Black continues covering. White starts to make shape over on the top, and then black moves here. I'm going to come to the shape at the top in just a minute, but the fact that black tanuki'd here is really interesting. And so I have a question with this shape in the upper right-hand corner, so up here. What's the status of the white group? This is a Sumego problem. And is white alive? Is white dead? Or is it indeterminate? Whoever goes next in the area gets to choose the status of that group. And go ahead and pause if you like, but I'm not going to give you the answer right now. I'll come back to it in a few minutes. So at any rate, black came over here to reinforce the upper right-hand corner. And at this point, if white was a human, I think white would be feeling really good about the game. And that's because the top area is destroyed. White, with the very next move, can completely live with that center top group. And if you want to go ahead and think about it, pause and see if you can find the sequence that allows white to live. All right, it's actually not much of a sequence. And with this move, white's alive. If black decides to block B, then white can make 2 eyes with A. And if black tries to prevent 2 eyes, then white can connect underneath at B. So with this move, white's alive and has to be feeling pretty good about the game. But white is a stronger player. I mean, for sure, I would just do that and be ecstatic. But white's a far stronger player than me and instead says, you know what? Before I just go back and live, why don't I create some defects in black shape? Create some cutting points, maybe ask if he'll even let me out. But at a very minimum, let's create some cutting points. And you can see that it's actually quite a long sequence of white threatening to move out. But what white's actually doing is, making black get a really funny shape. I mean, look at this. Cutting point here, white can move out, cutting point there, threatening that. Black is just not, a solid shape, right? And I guess white feels confident with this approach so long as white can retain sente. And that continues up to this point where white comes back and says, okay, fine, I'm alive. And I feel pretty good about the game. Right, I've already more than hinted at the outcome, so let's go ahead and see it. But do you guys remember the problem in the upper right-hand corner, the status of the group? So if you said the status is to be determined, whoever goes first wins, that is the correct answer. It is not alive as it stands, and black takes its sente to go back and kill this corner. So white tries to live, but black responds correctly. And then white comes out and says, you know what? I've lived in the top center, which is great. I've lost the top right, which is a bit of a bummer, but I still feel really good about this game. And let me come up and mess with your shape. So black does a few forcing moves and tanukis over the course of defending himself, and white does the same. But black, all right, I'll connect here, and I'm going to build shape on the outside. White protects. Black moves to the lower right, and white says, no, your shape isn't good enough. You're going to have to connect it. And then I'll go back and help the lower right. But even then, I'm going to take Sente over here, really threatening the whole black group. And once again, I'm taking away your eye shape, and I'm threatening to surround you. And I'm peeping. So at this point, black cuts white off, and then white connects underneath. And this is a really interesting point of the game. So earlier in the video, when I was talking about masterpieces, and I said that rather than taking the safe route or the territorial route, it seems that these bots will just raise the stakes. And I think this is a pretty interesting example of it. Right now, black is completely surrounded and in a world of hurt. But black can solve it with just one move. If black plays at A, all the black stones are connected. Black is perfectly safe. But it must be that Golaxy says, yeah, I might be perfectly safe, but I'm perfectly safe and losing. And that's not good enough for me. So rather than just playing at A and making life, black decided to go ahead and raise the stakes and say, fine, I'm going to deny you B. I'm going to deny you the bottom. And it seems that white said, well, that's very noble. And I'm glad you're trying, and I will therefore give you a warrior's death. And denied that first move, that first possibility. The continuation from here is really interesting, and perhaps some would argue it's a one-way street. But all I can tell you is that if I was black, I would die in this position. And if I was white, I suspect black would live in this position. But the sequence is pretty cool. And you can see black trying to get out, trying to make shape, and white just saying, sorry, not going to happen. And, oh, you think you're capturing something? But no, I'll just connect underneath. And you black, completely lack eyes. And at this point, black is just completely dead. So I want to pause here for a second just to marvel at this. And again, when white played that invasion at B, I thought it was amazing. Like, white is seriously going to go inside of black's house, inside of black's thickness, and try to live. And not only does B live, it actually ends up killing A as well as the capping stone, killing all of those stones to win the game. And I think that's amazing. I think now we'll go into some variations that show why maybe this is a little bit too dangerous to try at home. But it is really cool to see how strong these bots are. Okay, so I mentioned that playing here was the losing move, or sort of the losing move, almost a losing move. It's hard to say. Golaxy prefers, a 2 million move, Golaxy prefers this as black's move than white. And let me just show one possible variation. At this point, Golaxy still feels it's a game, but actually black's ahead. So white's only got a 40% winning percentage. So does that mean the invasion was bad? Not necessarily, because if you give 2 million play out, Golaxy its choices, it changes moves before this as well. But this was the move that it felt was really bad. So for example, Golaxy with up to 2 million playouts per move prefers white to play here rather than at A. And actually this leads to a couple interesting variations, so why don't I go through? And this is one of the interesting thought experiments, if you will. And, if you were white and black played this, where would you play? And for me, I would play here. And the reason I'd connect here is because A is still under threat, right? So my connecting here as white is Sente, and black's going to have to answer. Or at least that's what I think. And indeed, that's right. But as Golaxy shows the playouts continuing, it actually says that this is really bad for white, and the game is pretty much over. Black's going to win. And that's what I mean when I was saying that maybe don't try this at home, because when I look at this position, it's hard for me not to imagine connecting. But it turns out, everything's right so far, but you make one little mistake, like connecting here, and the game is over. And instead, white should just come back and play over here. And when black goes ahead and cuts, when white plays here, according to Golaxy, white's fine. And I guess it's because there's still a threat against A, and there's still a threat against B, and there's still a threat of white getting out, and there's still a threat of white making shape and getting two eyes. And I guess all of that means it's a good game for white. So if we give high playout Golaxy its chance to change its mind again, it prefers this move for black than what was actually played in the game. So white's next move, white is going to cut here. And of course, black is going to Atari. And then the next move is really interesting. Black has a choice to go ahead and play at A, connect out that way, or to go ahead and make a large-scale sacrifice at B and seal off the rest of the center. Right, let me show the continuation today, and again, I'll do it fast, or pretty fast. If black goes ahead and cuts at A, white will go ahead and threaten the top black group, but really there is no chance to take it. And this outcome is slightly preferred for black to Golaxy. So this would be a good continuation. But if black were to go ahead and instead offer the sacrifice and capture the center at a large scale, it looks something like this. And who do you think's winning here? Well, according to Golaxy, it's white 104%. And when I asked Jennie what that means, she said, actually, Golaxy returns values over 100% for one side if it thinks the margin of victory is more than 25 points. So the sacrifice, although it works, leads to a sure loss for black. But remember the shape, because I'm going to show another continuation kind of like it. All right, we have time for one last variation tree, and it's pretty quick, but it's interesting. So if we go back to the very beginning and ask the same question of where to invade, and we ask high-level Golaxy, or high playout Golaxy, it actually likes this point right here. So let's go ahead and see the continuation. Black plays a similar covering strategy as before, but when white plays here, all I can guess is that black thinks white's going to be okay because it tanukis in the upper right-hand corner and plays out a similar variation that we saw before, giving white the opportunity to go first. And to return to the world of one small mistake can undo all of your good plans, where would you play now as white, A or B? And it turns out white is correct. And I don't have all the variations here, but according to Golaxy, if white just pushes, then white's going to be fine. Again, I guess the possibilities are breaking out and threatening A and B and making two eyes and whatever, but Golaxy feels that white's going to be fine. But I wouldn't have wasted your time on this variation if actually the attack at B didn't have an interesting outcome. Now, if you remember, last time when white played here, black had to come back and take this spot, that the sacrifice was too much. But it turns out that's not the case in this one, because black can go ahead and sacrifice. And at this point, Golaxy feels that black is 22 points ahead. So remember the last time we saw a shape similar to this, it was white that was at least 25 points ahead. So it's a huge swing. So what's the difference? Well, white's played an extra move inside. White only had 2 moves inside before. And instead, it exchanged it for this black move here, which, even though it's white's turn now, white has to make a choice. Is white going to spend a move and save the upper right-hand corner and give black Sente somewhere else? Or is it going to go ahead and sacrifice that corner? Either way, Golaxy likes black a whole lot better now. And I think that's kind of cool, getting about the same shape, but just with one move difference. And well, I think that's about it. Let's see. Do I have takeaways from this video? Yeah, it's exactly what sort of Jennie's theme was. Like, man, these bots are strong. And they're absolutely amazing to watch their games and their disrespect for large open areas. But along with that is the caveat of, try this at home at your own peril. And I showed a couple variations where if you just make a slight mistake, an almost obvious mistake, you're going to just straight up lose the game. So I guess I buy the 58% winning percentage for white if white is a bot, if white is Golaxy. But I don't really buy it, honestly, as humans. Certainly as amateur humans, but I suspect even for pro-level humans. The willingness to invade that deeply and the confidence to be able to pull it off is just unbelievable. Oh yeah, before I go, I want to give a thanks to Jennie Shen for letting me use this material. The presentation you gave at Congress was awesome and went into so much more detail than this, but I was glad to be able to do some of it. And I'd also like to say thank you for the Golaxy team for giving Jennie permission to use their self-play games, and also for using the terrific bot to analyze them. So thanks a lot, guys. Right, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I'm interested in your feedback on the masterpiece question that I started with, but also your thoughts on bots and winning percentages, anything you want to say. If you liked the video, please go ahead and like it, comment, subscribe. You guys know the deal. And I really appreciate your watching. Have a great day. See you next time.